Remember those brunch dishes that once made weekend mornings feel special? The ones straight out of old Betty Crocker cookbooks filled with bright Jell-O molds, fluffy coffee cakes, and casseroles that fed a crowd. Back then, these recipes weren't just food. They were tradition, comfort, and a little bit of mid-century magic. Today, most of them have vanished from our tables, but it's time to bring them back, one forgotten bite at a time. Cornmeal mush with syrup. In the early decades of the 20th century, before brunch became a social event complete with mimosas and hashtags, breakfast was about one thing: getting through the day without going hungry. Cornmeal mush was a staple on countless American tables, especially during the lean years of the Great Depression and World War II.
During the Great Depression and ate oatmeal for breakfast almost every day.
It was humble, hearty, and endlessly adaptable. A dish born not of culinary ambition, but of necessity. Cornmeal was cheap, shelf-stable, and widely available, making it the ideal foundation for a meal that could stretch to feed a whole family when money was tight. Preparing cornmeal mush was simple, and that was part of its charm. A pot of water was set to boil, salt added for just a touch of flavor, and then cornmeal was slowly whisked in to create a smooth, thick porridge. Once cooked, it could be served hot straight from the pot, drizzled with a little syrup, honey, or even a spoonful of homemade jam if the pantry was generous that week. The real magic happened with the leftovers. Once cooled, the mush could be sliced into squares or rectangles, then fried in butter or lard until crisp and golden, transforming it into something hearty and comforting. For many families, fried cornmeal mush was a weekend treat. The sizzle in the skillet and the sweet, buttery aroma filled the kitchen, turning something humble into a breakfast worth gathering around. Some households even topped it with crispy bacon, fried eggs, or a sprinkle of sugar and cinnamon to make it feel special. Rural communities especially embraced it, as it required no fancy ingredients. Just a bag of cornmeal and a bit of patience. Cornmeal mush wasn't just food, it was a symbol of resilience. Families gathered around chipped kitchen tables, eating together and finding comfort in its simple warmth. Today, it's largely been replaced by trendier breakfasts, smoothie bowls, overnight oats, or artisan sourdough. But in many ways, cornmeal mush was the original meal prep superstar. With a bit of syrup on top, it was proof that thrift and creativity could turn even the plainest ingredients into something satisfying. In a world obsessed with the next viral recipe, maybe there's room to bring this old favorite back and remember the lessons of resourcefulness it carries with it. Eggs goldenrod.
Well, today we're going to make something very different. It's called goldenrod eggs.
There was a time when eggs goldenrod was the height of homey sophistication, a dish that appeared on countless mid-century brunch tables, especially around Easter when hard-boiled eggs were in abundance. Today, it's practically vanished, but for decades it was a beloved staple of church breakfasts, bridal showers, and family gatherings. The dish has humble roots, relying on simple, inexpensive ingredients that most households kept on hand: eggs, milk, butter, and bread. Yet in its day, it was considered a clever way to transform leftovers into something both comforting and just a little elegant. The process was straightforward, but with a bit of ceremony. Hard-boiled eggs were carefully separated, the whites chopped into small pieces, and the yolks set aside. A velvety cream sauce was prepared from butter, flour, and milk, seasoned simply with salt and pepper. The chopped egg whites were stirred into the sauce, then spooned generously over crisp, buttered toast. Finally, the reserved yolks were pressed through a fine sieve or grated, their bright yellow crumbles scattered on top like a dusting of sunshine, hence the name goldenrod. The result was a dish that managed to be both hearty and delicate, with contrasting textures and colors that made it look far more impressive than its humble origins suggested. In its heyday, eggs goldenrod symbolized thrift and creativity, a reminder that good cooking didn't require fancy ingredients. Families gathered around the table, savoring the simple dish while catching up on the week's news. And for many children, it was a taste of home they never forgot. Today, it's nearly forgotten in a world of trendy brunch spots and elaborate Eggs Benedict variations. But perhaps Eggs Goldenrod deserves a revival, a quiet reminder that elegance can sometimes come from the simplest of kitchens and the humblest of ingredients. Prune Whip Parfait. Once upon a time, long before chia pudding and Greek yogurt parfaits filled our Instagram feeds, the prune whip parfait was considered the height of refined, health-conscious eating. Yes, prunes. While they're often the butt of jokes today, especially as a symbol of old people food, there was an era when prunes were celebrated as both nutritious and elegant. In the early to mid-20th century, especially during the 1930s and 40s, prunes were marketed as a wholesome, affordable fruit that could be enjoyed year-round. During wartime rationing, when fresh produce wasn't always available, a box of dried prunes was a pantry staple, packed with natural sweetness and, let's be honest, a reputation for keeping things regular. The prune whip parfait took this humble dried fruit and transformed it into something almost glamorous. The preparation began with prunes stewed gently in water until soft and luscious, then pureed into a smooth, darkly sweet mixture. This prune base was folded into stiffly beaten egg whites and sugar, creating a light, airy whip that was as delicate as any meringue. Once chilled, it was spooned into tall glasses, layered with whipped cream or custard, and sometimes topped with a scatter of chopped nuts for texture. The result was a dessert, or breakfast dish, depending on how you looked at it, that felt indulgent while still being firmly in the realm of good for you. Families served prune whip parfaits at Sunday brunches, church socials, and holiday gatherings where it was seen as both thrifty and impressive. Today, it's practically extinct, eclipsed by flashier, more photogenic treats. But in an age obsessed with superfoods and gut health, maybe it's time for a comeback. After all, prune whip parfait walked so kombucha and probiotic yogurt could run, and it still tastes like nostalgia in a glass. Salt cod hash? Salt cod hash is one of those dishes that feels like a relic from another world, a time when preservation wasn't a trendy buzzword but a matter of survival. Long before refrigeration, salt curing was the only way to keep fish from spoiling. And for families living through the Great Depression and the rationing years of World War II, a slab of salt cod in the pantry was like a promise. You could always count on it to stretch into a hearty meal. It was inexpensive, it lasted forever, and it packed the kind of protein that was hard to come by when meat was scarce. Making salt cod hash began with a crucial first step: soaking the fish. Salt cod arrived stiff and briny, almost like a culinary time capsule. Home cooks would soak it overnight, sometimes changing the water several times to tame its intense saltiness and revive its texture. Once rehydrated, the fish was flaked apart and mixed with diced potatoes, onions, and a bit of fat, usually butter or lard, though bacon grease was a prized upgrade. Everything went into a hot skillet, sizzling and crisping until the edges turned golden brown. Seasonings were simple: salt, pepper, and maybe a splash of cream if you were feeling fancy or had some left over from the neighbor's cow. For many families, this dish wasn't just about nourishment, it was about ritual. The smell of the fish sizzling with potatoes and onions would drift through the house, signaling that breakfast, or sometimes dinner, was almost ready. It was the kind of meal that filled bellies and stretched budgets, but it also provided comfort during uncertain times. In coastal towns, especially in New England, salt cod hash was tied to tradition, passed down through generations like a family heirloom. Salt cod hash wasn't glamorous, but it was deeply satisfying. It had a rustic heartiness that brought families together around the breakfast table or Sunday supper. Today, it's almost vanished, replaced by frozen fish fillets and takeout seafood baskets. But its legacy lingers, a humble dish that turned scarcity into comfort, one skillet at a time. Reviving it today isn't just about nostalgia. It's a way to reconnect with a past where nothing was wasted and every meal had a story to tell. Stewed dried fruit medley. Before supermarkets offered strawberries in December and mangoes in March, fruit was a seasonal luxury. In the early to mid-20th century, especially during the Great Depression and wartime rationing, fresh produce was fleeting and precious. When the orchards went bare for winter, families turned to dried fruit to keep a bit of sweetness on the table. Prunes, apricots, raisins, figs, and apples were pantry staples, inexpensive and long-lasting. Stewed dried fruit medley was born from this necessity, a simple, frugal way to transform the humble dried fruit into something warm, comforting, and surprisingly elegant. The process was almost ritualistic. A pot of water was set to simmer, and the dried fruit was added in stages, depending on how long each needed to soften. A touch of sugar, perhaps a cinnamon stick, or a slice of lemon peel, and the mixture slowly came to life, filling the kitchen with a sweet, tangy aroma. As the fruit plumped and released its juices, it created a syrupy stew that could be spooned over toast, served alongside oatmeal, or eaten on its own as a modest dessert. Some families even splashed in a bit of wine or brandy for special occasions, turning a humble dish into a small celebration. Stewed dried fruit medley wasn't just about taste. It was about making do and making memories. Mothers and grandmothers passed down their preferred blends, each pot a reflection of what was available and affordable. Today, the dish has mostly disappeared, overshadowed by instant fruit cups and flashy smoothie bowls. Yet there's something timeless about its simplicity. In an era obsessed with novelty, stewed dried fruit reminds us that good food doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it's just a handful of pantry staples, a little patience, and the warmth of a kitchen on a cold winter morning. Baked ham and banana hollandaise. Every era has its culinary experiments, those dishes that make future generations raise an eyebrow and whisper, "They actually ate that?" Baked ham and banana hollandaise is one of those legendary mid-century creations, immortalized in the pages of Betty Crocker's cookbooks from the 1950s. It was a time when home cooks embraced convenience foods and daring flavor combinations, when a dinner party showstopper didn't need to make perfect sense, as long as it looked impressive on the table. And nothing said fancy, like a dish covered in rich golden hollandaise sauce. The recipe itself was straightforward, though undeniably odd. Bananas were peeled and wrapped in thin slices of salty baked ham, then arranged neatly in a casserole dish. After a quick bake to warm everything through and let the flavors mingle, the entire dish was blanketed with a glossy hollandaise sauce made from egg yolks, butter, and lemon juice. The result was a curious blend of sweet and savory, creamy and tangy. In the 1950s, this wasn't seen as strange at all. Pairing fruit with meat was downright sophisticated. Think of pineapple on ham or cherries atop a roast pork loin. Bananas, apparently, were just the next logical step. Presentation was everything back then, and this dish delivered. The ham-wrapped bananas were often lined up with precision, sometimes garnished with sprigs of parsley or a scattering of paprika to give it that extra pop of color. In its heyday, baked ham and banana hollandaise appeared on Sunday brunch tables, church potlucks, and even at bridge clubs, where hostesses prided themselves on serving something unexpected and conversation-worthy. Today, though, it's mostly a punchline, resurfacing occasionally in vintage recipe videos that straddle the line between nostalgia and disbelief. Yet there's something oddly endearing about this quirky relic. It represents a fearless spirit of home cooking, when people weren't afraid to experiment and push boundaries, even if the results seem strange to us now. Who knows? Served with a wink, a strong pot of coffee, and a perfectly whipped hollandaise, this dish just might win over a few brave modern brunch guests. Golden glow salad, Jell-O plus carrots plus pineapple. There was a time when no potluck or Sunday brunch table felt complete without a shimmering molded salad taking center stage. In the mid-20th century, especially during the 1950s and 60s, Jell-O wasn't just dessert, it was a canvas for creativity and a sign of a modern, well-stocked kitchen. Among the many dazzling concoctions to grace the pages of Betty Crocker cookbooks, Golden Glow Salad stood out for its sunny color and curious combination of ingredients: orange Jell-O, shredded carrots, and crushed pineapple. To today's palate, it may sound odd, but to mid-century homemakers, it was the perfect balance of sweet, tangy, and refreshing. The preparation was both simple and dramatic. The Jell-O was dissolved in boiling water, then cooled slightly before the carrots and pineapple were folded in. The mixture was poured into a decorative mold. Ring shapes were especially popular, and chilled until firm. When unmolded onto a platter, it glistened like stained glass, the bright orange gelatin flecked with golden pineapple and strands of carrot suspended inside. Served with a dollop of mayonnaise or a swirl of whipped cream, it wasn't just food, it was a conversation piece. Golden Glow Salad embodied the spirit of its time. It was thrifty, using pantry staples that could be kept on hand year-round, and it fit perfectly into the era's fascination with convenience foods and modern refrigeration. Jell-O molds were a hostess's secret weapon, easy to make ahead of time and guaranteed to impress with their eye-catching presentation. During holiday gatherings, a Golden Glow Salad often took center stage alongside carved hams, deviled eggs, and baskets of warm rolls. Today, it's often remembered with a mix of fondness and gentle teasing, a quirky relic of a bygone culinary era. But there's no denying its charm. This dish captured the optimism of the post-war years, when bright colors and bold combinations symbolized progress and modernity. One slice of Golden Glow Salad is like a little edible time machine, transporting you back to a kitchen where creativity, convenience, and a touch of showmanship ruled the day. Sunshine coffee cake. There's something undeniably comforting about the smell of a coffee cake baking in the oven, especially on a lazy Sunday morning. Before cinnamon rolls came in tubes and coffee cake became something you grabbed from a grocery store bakery case, homemade versions were a source of pride and a centerpiece of weekend brunches, church potlucks, and neighborly get-togethers. Betty Crocker's Sunshine Coffee Cake was one of those recipes that felt both special and accessible, the kind of dish that brought families running to the table the moment it emerged, golden and fragrant from the oven. The sunshine in its name wasn't just for show. This coffee cake was bright and cheerful thanks to the addition of citrus zest and juice, usually from oranges or lemons, which gave it a subtle tang beneath its sweet crumb. The batter was simple, relying on everyday pantry ingredients like flour, sugar, eggs, and butter, items most mid-century households always had on hand. Once mixed, it was poured into a well-greased pan and topped with a streusel mixture of sugar, butter, and cinnamon, sometimes studded with nuts for extra crunch. As it baked, the topping caramelized slightly, creating a crust that was both sweet and crisp, perfectly contrasting the soft, tender cake beneath. Sunshine Coffee Cake was more than breakfast. It was a gesture of hospitality. Hosts would slice generous squares to serve alongside cups of percolator coffee, while children hovered nearby, hoping to sneak a warm corner piece. Today, it has largely faded into memory, overshadowed by elaborate bakery confections and fast food breakfasts. Yet, the charm of sunshine coffee cake endures. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest recipes, the ones made from scratch, served with love, and shared around a crowded table, are the ones that linger brightest in our hearts, like a bit of sunshine on a plate. Puffed oven pancake, Dutch baby. Long before TikTok made dramatic soufflé pancakes a viral sensation, there was the puffed oven pancake, better known today as the Dutch baby. In mid-century America, this dish was a marvel of home cooking, a breakfast that felt fancy but required nothing more than a hot oven, a well-seasoned skillet, and a few basic pantry staples. It appeared in Betty Crocker cookbooks as a showpiece brunch item, something you'd serve when company was coming over or when you wanted to impress without a lot of fuss. The magic of a puffed oven pancake came from its simplicity. Eggs, milk, flour, and a pinch of salt were whisked together into a thin batter, then poured into a skillet sizzling with melted butter. The pan was slid into a very hot oven, and that's where the real drama began. As it baked, the batter puffed up spectacularly, rising along the sides of the pan like a golden brown crown while the center stayed tender and custardy. When it emerged, steaming and impressive, it practically begged for a moment of applause before it inevitably deflated. Traditionally, the Dutch baby was served dusted with powdered sugar and a squeeze of lemon juice, but in Betty Crocker's heyday, home cooks got creative. Fresh berries, spoonfuls of jam, toasted nuts, or even a drizzle of maple syrup might make an appearance, turning the pancake into a versatile brunch star. Some families even leaned savory, topping it with crispy bacon or sautéed mushrooms for a more filling meal. The real beauty of this dish was how thrifty and practical it was. It used everyday ingredients that most households already had on hand and required no special equipment. Yet when that pancake puffed dramatically in the oven, it felt like a moment of magic. Today, you can still find Dutch babies on restaurant menus and food blogs, but back then, it felt like theater unfolding in your very own kitchen. A slice of this airy, buttery pancake wasn't just breakfast. It was a reminder that sometimes the simplest recipes deliver the most unforgettable wow factor. Breakfast sausage, ring with cheese sauce. In the grand tradition of mid-century American cooking, few things delighted a brunch table quite like a dish shaped into a perfect ring. Betty Crocker recipes were especially fond of this presentation, which managed to be both practical and impressive. The breakfast sausage ring with cheese sauce was a classic example, a hearty, eye-catching centerpiece that was as much about its visual appeal as its flavor. It wasn't just breakfast, it was a statement, the kind of dish that made guests pause and say, "Wow, you really went all out," even if it didn't take much more effort than a regular casserole. The preparation was straightforward, using ingredients nearly every household had on hand. Sausage links, or bulk breakfast sausage, were browned, then arranged in a circular pattern in a ring mold or bundt pan. A savory batter of eggs, milk, and breadcrumbs, or sometimes biscuit dough, was poured over the top, binding everything together. Once baked, the ring was carefully unmolded onto a serving platter, revealing a golden, perfectly formed wreath of breakfast goodness that looked almost too pretty to cut into. But the real star of this dish was the cheese sauce. Simple yet decadent, it was made by melting butter, whisking in flour to form a roux, and adding milk until the mixture turned silky and thick. A generous handful of shredded cheddar, or occasionally Swiss or Colby, was stirred in at the end, creating a rich, velvety sauce that was poured over slices of the sausage ring just before serving. Some cooks even added a dash of mustard or Worcestershire sauce for a little extra zing. In its prime, the breakfast sausage ring was a hostess's dream. Frugal, filling, and festive. It could feed a crowd, stretch a pound of sausage farther than anyone expected, and look downright elegant while doing it. Today it's rarely seen, replaced by store-bought breakfast sandwiches and elaborate brunch boards. Yet there's something deeply nostalgic about the image of a perfectly unmolded ring, steam rising, ready to be sliced and shared. It's proof that with a few simple ingredients and a touch of creativity, you can turn an ordinary breakfast into an unforgettable event. Bacon and egg pie. Before quiche became the brunch darling of the 1980s, there was a simpler, heartier dish that graced countless American tables: the bacon and egg pie. Found in the pages of mid-century Betty Crocker cookbooks, this dish was a reliable crowd pleaser, perfect for Sunday breakfasts, potlucks, and holiday mornings. While quiche leaned toward the elegant and French, bacon and egg pie was firmly rooted in American practicality, straightforward, filling, and made with ingredients every household already had on hand. The preparation began with the basic pie crust, often homemade, though store-bought refrigerated dough became popular as convenience cooking took hold in the 1950s. Into this crust went layers of crisp, smoky bacon and lightly beaten eggs, sometimes mixed with a splash of cream or milk to create a custard-like texture. Onions or a sprinkle of cheese might be added for extra flavor, but the beauty of this dish was its simplicity. Once assembled, the pie was topped with another layer of pastry, sealed and baked until the crust turned golden and flaky and the filling set into a savory, satisfying whole. When served hot from the oven, slices of bacon and egg pie were rustic and comforting, the kind of breakfast that could feed a large family without breaking the bank. It traveled well, making it ideal for church breakfasts or early morning gatherings. Today, it has largely disappeared, overshadowed by trendy avocado toast and elaborate brunch menus. But there's a timeless charm in its straightforward goodness. Bacon and egg pie captures a moment in American cooking when dishes were designed to nourish and impress without fuss. It reminds us that sometimes the best meals are the simplest ones. Just bacon, eggs, and pastry coming together to create a slice of warmth and tradition on a chilly morning. Cinnamon pull-apart bread, monkey bread. There's a certain magic to recipes that invite you to eat with your hands, and few mid-century brunch dishes captured that playful spirit like cinnamon pull-apart bread, more commonly known today as monkey bread. In the 1950s and 60s, this dish wasn't just a treat, it was an experience. Found in the pages of Betty Crocker cookbooks and on countless potluck tables, it was the kind of recipe that felt special without requiring a culinary degree to pull off. It was perfect for holidays, Sunday brunches, and cozy weekend mornings when families wanted something warm, sweet, and shareable. The process was wonderfully simple. Balls of yeast dough, sometimes homemade, sometimes from canned biscuit dough, as the age of convenience cooking took hold, were rolled in melted butter and a generous mixture of cinnamon and sugar. These little nuggets were then layered into a bundt pan or tube pan, building a tower of sticky, sugary goodness. As it baked, the sugar melted into a rich caramel glaze and the whole loaf puffed up into an impressive golden dome. When turned out onto a platter, it became a centerpiece that was almost too pretty to eat. Almost. Some homemakers like to jazz it up with chopped pecans or walnuts, sprinkling them between the dough layers for a little crunch. Others would drizzle a simple powdered sugar glaze over the top, adding an extra layer of sweetness and shine. No matter the variation, the result was always irresistible. The best part, of course, was serving it. Instead of slicing, everyone simply pulled off pieces with their fingers, each bite soft, buttery, and perfectly spiced. For kids, it felt like a special kind of breakfast rebellion. For adults, it was a nostalgic indulgence that brought out their inner child. Today, monkey bread has made a modest comeback, often appearing in holiday recipe collections or viral cooking videos. Still, there's something about the original Betty Crocker version that embodies mid-century hospitality, a dish designed to be shared, savored, and remembered one sweet, sticky handful at a time. It wasn't just food, it was a moment of togetherness, baked right into every bite. Crab meat Newburg on toast points. Once upon a time, before brunch menus were filled with avocado toast and smoked salmon platters, there was crab meat Newburg on toast points, a dish that brought a touch of elegance to the mid-century American table. This recipe appeared in Betty Crocker cookbooks as the kind of sophisticated entree you'd serve for a ladies' luncheon, a bridal shower, or a particularly special Sunday brunch. It was rich and creamy, with just enough flair to impress guests while still being practical for the home cook. The foundation of the dish was a classic Newburg sauce, a descendant of old-fashioned French cream sauces, but streamlined for the American kitchen. Butter was melted and blended with a bit of flour to create a silky base, then cream was whisked in to form a luscious, velvety mixture. A splash of sherry or white wine gave it depth, while a sprinkle of paprika or nutmeg added subtle warmth. Into this sauce went tender chunks of crab meat, canned, frozen, or fresh, depending on availability and budget. In the post-war years, canned crab was often the go-to, making this once luxurious dish accessible to middle-class families. The toast points were simple but essential. Thin slices of white bread were trimmed of crusts, cut into neat triangles, and toasted until golden and crisp. These little wedges acted as edible spoons, ready to scoop up the creamy, savory crab mixture. When plated, the toast points were fanned out on a platter, the crab Newburg spooned generously over the top, creating a presentation that felt straight out of a vintage magazine spread. Today, crab meat Newburg is rarely seen outside of retro cookbooks, replaced by lighter fare and modern seafood dishes. But one bite would transport you back to a time when brunch meant elegance, cream sauce, and a perfectly cut triangle of toast. Pickle and olive cream cheese loaf. In the mid-century world of homemaking, a good hostess knew that presentation was everything. That's where the pickle and olive cream cheese loaf came in. A striking, savory creation that wasn't just food, but a conversation piece. Popular in Betty Crocker cookbooks and community recipe collections, this dish was a shining example of mid-century entertaining, practical, affordable, and just fancy enough to make guests feel like they were part of something special. At its core, this loaf was a celebration of simplicity and thrift. Cream cheese, the workhorse of so many retro recipes, formed the base. It was softened and blended with mayonnaise or sour cream to create a silky, spreadable texture. Into this creamy foundation went finely chopped pickles and briny green olives, their sharp, tangy flavors providing a lively contrast to the richness of the cheese. Sometimes, a bit of pimento was added for color, and a dash of onion or celery gave it extra crunch and bite. Once mixed, the spread was carefully shaped, often in a loaf pan lined with wax paper or plastic wrap to create those clean, dramatic edges. After a thorough chilling in the refrigerator, the loaf was unmolded onto a serving platter and surrounded by crackers, celery sticks, or even thin slices of party rye bread. The result was a dish as visually striking as it was tasty, with flecks of green and red suspended in the creamy base like edible confetti. It was perfect for brunch buffets, wedding showers, or holiday gatherings, especially when paired with a pot of coffee and a tray of other savory bites. Though it has largely disappeared from modern menus, the pickle and olive cream cheese loaf remains a testament to an era when a few pantry staples and a little imagination could create a centerpiece worth remembering. Peach cottage cheese salad. In the mid-20th century, when brunch tables were less about photogenic spreads and more about practicality and balance, the peach cottage cheese salad was a staple that perfectly walked the line between health food and treat. Today, the combination might raise an eyebrow. Juicy canned peach halves nestled against scoops of cottage cheese, topped with a drizzle of cream or a cherry for flair. But in its heyday, It was the picture of wholesome elegance. Betty Crocker often featured this dish in her cookbooks as a refreshing side or light main course, ideal for luncheons, church socials, or summer brunches on the back porch. The beauty of this salad was its simplicity. At a time when convenience foods were becoming increasingly popular, canned peaches were a pantry essential. They brought consistent sweetness and color to the table, even in the depths of winter when fresh produce was hard to come by. Cottage cheese, meanwhile, was considered a superfood of its day, packed with protein and viewed as a slimming, modern alternative to heavier dairy products like cream or sour cream. The dish came together in minutes. A peach half was placed on a crisp bed of iceberg lettuce, crowned with a generous scoop of cottage cheese, and finished with a garnish of maraschino cherry or a sprinkle of paprika for a hint of color. Some homemakers added a drizzle of honey or a dusting of chopped nuts for extra flair, while others kept it classic and plain, letting the peaches shine. It was endlessly adaptable, making it a dependable go-to for busy hostesses. This salad symbolized the mid-century fascination with food that felt light, tidy, and a little bit glamorous. It was the kind of dish a hostess could prepare quickly while still impressing her guests, proving that health-conscious didn't have to mean boring. Today, peach cottage cheese salad has largely disappeared, overshadowed by smoothie bowls, Greek yogurt parfaits, and avocado toast. Yet there's something undeniably charming about its retro simplicity, a dish that celebrated sweetness, freshness, and the belief that a few pantry staples could create a small moment of grace at the table. It's a reminder of a time when a single canned peach and a humble scoop of cottage cheese could embody both hospitality and a touch of mid-century modern flair. Cheddar pineapple loaf. There are certain recipes from the mid-century era that make modern cooks pause and say, wait, they put what with what? The cheddar pineapple loaf is one of those dishes, a bold, quirky creation that somehow managed to straddle the line between sweet and savory dinner and dessert. Featured in Betty Crocker cookbooks and church potluck spreads of the 1950s and 60s, it was the kind of dish that embodied the adventurous spirit of the time when canned goods and processed cheese opened up a whole new world of culinary possibilities. At its core, the recipe was surprisingly straightforward. Pineapple, usually canned chunks or crushed, was folded into a rich batter made with eggs, sugar, and milk. Then came the star ingredient, sharp cheddar cheese. Grated or cubed, it was layered into the mixture, creating pockets of tangy, salty flavor that contrasted with the pineapple's bright sweetness. Some versions even called for a crunchy topping of buttered breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, adding texture and a touch of golden brown decadence. The loaf was baked until the kitchen filled with a scent both intriguing and slightly confusing. Was it a dessert or a side dish? The answer was always yes. Served warm, slices revealed tender, fruity layers punctuated by melted cheese, making it a natural companion to baked ham or roast chicken at a holiday brunch. It was the kind of dish that got people talking and maybe even arguing around the table. Today, the cheddar pineapple loaf has largely vanished, replaced by more conventional pairings and streamlined menus. But in its time, it reflected a uniquely optimistic era in American cooking, one where home cooks weren't afraid to experiment, and where a single loaf could surprise, delight, and maybe even scandalize the guests, all in the name of hospitality. Spam and cheese quiche. Back in the day, before artisanal brunch menus and locally sourced farm-to-table quiches became the norm, there was a humbler, heartier version that graced countless American tables: spam and cheese quiche. This dish, popularized through Betty Crocker cookbooks and mid-century homemaking guides, was the epitome of practicality mixed with a dash of creativity. It took two affordable, readily available ingredients, canned spam and shredded cheese, and transformed them into something that felt just fancy enough to serve to company on a Sunday morning. Spam, that much maligned yet strangely beloved pantry staple, was a star player in post-war kitchens. It was inexpensive, shelf-stable, and adaptable, making it perfect for busy homemakers and tight budgets. When paired with eggs and cheese, it elevated from simple lunch meat to something richer and more comforting. The process was straightforward. Cubes of Spam were browned slightly to bring out their smoky, salty flavor, then scattered over a buttery pie crust. A mixture of eggs, milk, and seasonings was poured over the top, followed by a generous layer of shredded cheddar or Swiss cheese. The whole thing baked until puffed and golden, filling the kitchen with the mouth-watering aroma of melted cheese and savory pork. This was the kind of brunch dish that could stretch a few ingredients to feed a crowd, making it ideal for large families or holiday gatherings. It also had a certain mid-century charm, a touch of sophistication, but still grounded in frugality and common sense. Today, Spam often gets a bad rap, yet there's something nostalgically satisfying about this quirky quiche. It's a reminder of a time when resourcefulness ruled the kitchen, and when a simple can of meat could be the starting point for a warm, hearty dish that brought everyone to the table, no questions asked. Broccoli and rice brunch bake. The broccoli and rice brunch bake was one of those dependable mid-century recipes that perfectly embodied the era's love of hearty, make-ahead casseroles. It appeared regularly in Betty Crocker cookbooks and on potluck tables from the 1960s through the 1980s, when brunch wasn't about avocado toast or trendy frittatas, but about stretching a few simple ingredients into a dish big enough to feed a hungry crowd. It was practical, comforting, and just a little bit sophisticated. Exactly what a good hostess was looking for. The dish began with two pantry staples, white rice and frozen broccoli. In a time when freezers were still a novelty, frozen vegetables felt wonderfully modern and convenient, a true symbol of progress in the mid-century kitchen. The broccoli was steamed until just tender, then mixed with fluffy cooked rice in a creamy binder, usually a can of condensed cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup. Shredded cheddar cheese was folded in to add richness, while beaten eggs gave the bake structure and helped it puff slightly in the oven. For an extra touch of flair, a crunchy topping of buttered breadcrumbs or crushed crackers was sprinkled on top, turning golden and crisp as it baked. As it cooked, the kitchen filled with the warm, homey aroma of melted cheese and toasted crumbs. When served, the bake revealed a luscious, custard-like interior, the broccoli providing cheerful pops of green against the creamy backdrop of rice and cheese. Some homemakers added diced ham or leftover chicken to turn it into a complete meal, while others kept it strictly vegetarian, making it a versatile option for any table. It was the kind of dish that worked equally well as a side or a main course, making it a go-to for Easter brunches, Sunday potlucks, baby showers, or even weeknight dinners. Today, this casserole feels like a relic of another time, yet its appeal is timeless. It's a simple, satisfying reminder of how a few basic ingredients, handled with care and a touch of creativity, could come together to create something truly memorable and crowd-pleasing. Tangy tomato aspic with shrimp. In the golden age of mid-century entertaining, few dishes announced their presence quite as dramatically as a gleaming tomato aspic. The tangy tomato aspic with shrimp was a true showpiece, a dish meant to be placed proudly at the center of a buffet table where it could catch the light and the attention of every guest. Today, the very idea of a savory gelatin might seem odd, but in the 1950s and 60s, molded salads were the height of sophistication. Betty Crocker's version brought a zesty seafood twist to the trend, combining bold flavors with a striking presentation. At its core, this dish began with a seasoned tomato base. Canned tomato juice or puree was simmered with a touch of vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, lemon juice, and a sprinkle of spices to create a tangy, savory broth. Unflavored gelatin was dissolved into the warm mixture, giving it that signature firm yet wobbly texture. Once cooled slightly, tender cooked shrimp were folded in. along with bits of celery or green pepper for a little crunch and color. The mixture was then poured into a ring mold and chilled overnight, transforming into a shimmering, ruby red centerpiece. Unmolding was always a moment of suspense and ceremony. The finished ring would be turned out onto a platter, often surrounded by crisp lettuce, sliced cucumbers, or even deviled eggs for a full retro spread. Slices were served alongside mayonnaise or cocktail sauce, the cool, tangy jelly balancing the delicate sweetness of the shrimp. While savory gelatin dishes have mostly faded into obscurity, this aspic remains a fascinating glimpse into an era when presentation was as important as taste. It represents a time when home cooks weren't afraid to experiment and when a little gelatin could turn a simple brunch into an unforgettable event. Sausage stuffed crepes? There's something inherently luxurious about a crepe. Thin, delicate, and endlessly versatile, and they've always carried a whiff of European elegance. In mid-century America, however, Betty Crocker and countless homemakers gave this French classic a distinctly practical, all-American twist: the sausage-stuffed crepe. It was the perfect brunch dish for a time when home entertaining was on the rise, and hostesses wanted to impress without spending all morning in the kitchen. This recipe struck the ideal balance between sophistication and simplicity, making it a hit at church gatherings, bridal showers, and Sunday family brunches. The dish began with a simple batter of eggs, milk, and flour, whisked until smooth, and poured into a lightly greased skillet to form thin, golden crepes. While these delicate wrappers were cooking, the filling came together on the stove, crumbled breakfast sausage browned until savory and fragrant, then mixed with sautéed onions, a little cream, and sometimes a touch of cheese to bind it all together. Each crepe was then filled with a spoonful of the rich, meaty mixture rolled up neatly and nestled side by side in a buttered baking dish. To finish, the crepes were topped with a drizzle of cream sauce or melted cheese and baked just long enough to meld the flavors and heat everything through. The result was nothing short of irresistible: soft, tender crepes, giving way to a hearty, flavorful filling, each bite offering a perfect contrast of textures. While crepes today are often associated with Nutella or fresh fruit, this savory version tells the story of a different era, one when brunch was hearty and satisfying, and a clever home cook could stretch a pound of sausage into a meal fit for company. It's a dish that deserves a comeback, especially on cold mornings when comfort food reigns supreme. Overnight refrigerator rolls. There was a time when the smell of homemade bread was a common feature of American kitchens, a warm, yeasty perfume that meant someone had been hard at work long before breakfast was served. Among the most beloved recipes from that era was the overnight refrigerator roll, a clever invention that brought together the best of homemade baking and modern convenience. Betty Crocker popularized this recipe as a way for busy homemakers to serve fresh, tender rolls without waking up at the crack of dawn to knead and proof dough. The magic of these rolls lay in their timing. The dough, made from simple pantry staples like flour, yeast, milk, sugar, and butter, was prepared the night before. After an initial rise, it was tucked into the refrigerator to rest overnight. This slow, cold fermentation allowed the yeast to work gently, developing a deep, complex flavor while the cook got a full night's sleep. By morning, the dough was ready to be shaped into balls, crescents, or twists, placed in a greased pan, and left for a final rise while the oven preheated. Some home bakers would sprinkle the tops with sesame seeds or brush them with melted butter to create an extra special finish. When baked, the rolls emerged golden brown and irresistible, with a soft, pillowy interior and a slightly sweet, buttery crust. The aroma alone was enough to draw sleepy family members to the table, eager to tear into the first warm roll. They were perfect for holiday brunches, Sunday family breakfasts, or any occasion that called for a homemade touch. Slathered with jam, honey, or even sausage gravy, they had a way of disappearing from the table faster than they could cool. Today, With ready-made doughs and frozen rolls just a grocery run away, overnight refrigerator rolls are often overlooked, yet they remain a testament to mid-century ingenuity. A recipe that balanced hard work and hospitality, proving that with a little planning and patience, a homemade roll could still be the star of the brunch table and a lasting symbol of care and comfort. Hot chicken salad casserole. Hot chicken salad casserole was once the kind of dish that could turn an ordinary Sunday brunch into something memorable. Popular in mid-century Betty Crocker cookbooks and community cookbooks alike, it was a bridge between the cold, mayonnaise-based chicken salads of picnics and the warm, bubbly casseroles that defined American comfort food. It was hearty, creamy, and designed to feed a crowd without much fuss. A true staple of potlucks, church suppers, and family gatherings. The base of the casserole began with cooked chicken, often left over from a roast or boiled specifically for this dish. In the days before rotisserie chickens at every supermarket, this was usually a frugal way to stretch a bird across multiple meals. The chicken was shredded or diced and mixed with chopped celery for crunch, a scattering of onion for flavor, and sliced water chestnuts or almonds for a bit of unexpected texture. The dressing was a creamy blend of mayonnaise and sometimes sour cream, seasoned with salt, pepper, and a splash of lemon juice to brighten things up. Everything was spooned into a casserole dish and topped with a generous layer of shredded cheese or crushed potato chips. Because in mid-century cooking, a crunchy topping was practically a requirement. The casserole baked until bubbly and golden, the aroma of chicken, cheese, and toasted crumbs filling the kitchen. Served hot, it was both familiar and a little fancy, making it ideal for bridal showers, Easter brunches, or a comforting meal on a chilly evening. Today, it has largely fallen out of fashion, replaced by lighter, fresher dishes. Yet there's something enduring about its cozy charm. A reminder of a time when a single casserole dish could bring everyone to the table and make even the humblest ingredients feel like a celebration. Brunch strata with mushrooms and cheese. There's a certain elegance to a brunch strata, the kind of dish that looks and tastes far more complicated than it really is. In the mid-century era, when Betty Crocker ruled the kitchen and entertaining was all about efficiency and flair, the brunch strata with mushrooms and cheese became a go-to recipe for hostesses who wanted to impress. Without hovering over a stove all morning, it was the perfect solution for a weekend gathering or holiday breakfast, offering rich, savory flavors and the make-ahead convenience that busy homemakers craved. At its heart, a strata is simply a layered casserole, a savory bread pudding that soaks up a custard of eggs and milk. This version started with cubes of day-old bread, the thrifty base that made it both budget-friendly and hearty. Fresh mushrooms were sautéed in butter until tender and earthy, then scattered between the bread layers along with shredded cheese, often cheddar or Swiss. Some versions included diced ham or crumbled sausage for extra protein, while others added onions or green peppers for a pop of color and flavor. The magic happened when the egg mixture was poured over the top, seeping into every crevice and binding the layers together. The beauty of this dish was in its overnight rest. After being assembled, the strata was covered and chilled in the refrigerator, giving the bread time to fully absorb the custard. By morning, it was ready to slide into the oven, where it baked into a golden, puffed masterpiece. The aroma of buttery mushrooms, toasted bread, and melted cheese filled the house, greeting guests before they even sat down to eat. Served in generous squares, the strata was rich and satisfying without being fussy, making it a reliable favorite for decades. It was equally at home on a Christmas morning table, a Sunday brunch buffet, or even as a comforting weeknight dinner with a simple side salad. While it has faded from everyday menus, it remains a timeless example of mid-century ingenuity, a dish that turned humble, affordable ingredients into something celebratory and perfect for sharing around a crowded brunch table. Fruit pizza with cream cheese base. Long before Instagram made colorful, over-the-top desserts a trend, there was the fruit pizza, a cheerful, crowd-pleasing dish that brought a burst of color to mid-century brunch tables. Betty Crocker popularized this recipe as a fun, slightly whimsical way to serve fresh fruit, blending the charm of a classic summer fruit tart with the simplicity of a sugar cookie. It wasn't just a dessert, it was an edible centerpiece, designed to wow guests and satisfy a sweet tooth all at once. The base of the fruit pizza was delightfully simple, a large sugar cookie baked in a round or rectangular pan until golden and slightly crisp. Once cooled, it became the crust, sturdy enough to hold a generous layer of sweetened cream cheese. This creamy layer was often flavored with a splash of vanilla or a hint of lemon zest, giving it a tangy richness that balanced the sweetness of the fruit. Sometimes whipped cream was folded in for extra lightness, making the filling even more indulgent. The real artistry came in the topping. Slices of colorful fresh fruit, strawberries, kiwi, blueberries, mandarin oranges, grapes, were arranged in neat concentric circles or playful patterns, creating a mosaic of natural beauty. Some cooks added a light glaze, often made with apricot jam or a bit of gelatin, to give the fruit a glossy finish and keep it looking vibrant. The result was a dish so eye-catching that guests often hesitated to cut into it, preferring to admire it first. Fruit pizza was a dish that perfectly captured the optimism of its time. It was easy enough for kids to help assemble, yet elegant enough to serve at baby showers, bridal brunches, or summer picnics. Each slice offered a delightful mix of textures: tender cookie, creamy filling, and juicy fruit. It was also endlessly adaptable. Home cooks could swap in whatever fruits were in season or even experiment with flavored cream cheese or spiced cookie bases. Though it's less common today, fruit pizza deserves a revival. It's a nostalgic reminder that sometimes the simplest ideas, cookie, cream cheese, and fruit, can come together to create something both beautiful and unforgettable. A dish that brightened any table and every mood. Liver sausage, spread with crackers. There was a time when no respectable mid-century hostess would dream of setting out a party table without at least one creamy, savory spread surrounded by a ring of neatly arranged crackers. Among the most popular of these retro delights was liver sausage spread, a dish that brought a touch of old-world flavor to American brunches and cocktail hours. Featured prominently in Betty Crocker cookbooks, this recipe offered a thrifty yet elegant way to turn a humble block of liver sausage into something that felt special enough for guests. Liver sausage, sometimes called liverwurst, was a staple of the era, beloved for its rich, distinctive taste and affordability. To make the spread, the sausage was blended with softened cream cheese or butter until smooth and velvety. A splash of milk or cream helped achieve the perfect consistency, while a bit of mustard, Worcestershire sauce, or finely chopped onion added tang and complexity. Some versions even called for a dash of paprika or a sprinkle of fresh parsley, giving the mixture a hint of color and flair. Once prepared, the spread was chilled, then either served in a decorative bowl or molded into a tidy shape, sometimes even a ball or a loaf, before being surrounded by a halo of crisp crackers. Guests would scoop or spread it onto their plates, pairing the rich, salty mixture with the satisfying crunch of a buttery cracker. In true Betty Crocker fashion, it could be dressed up or down, depending on the occasion, making it as suitable for a holiday brunch as it was for a casual Sunday gathering. Today, liver sausage spread has mostly faded from the mainstream, overshadowed by charcuterie boards and artisanal pâtés. Yet for those who remember it, this simple dish holds a nostalgic charm, recalling an era when a well-set table, a good conversation, and a few pantry staples could make any gathering feel festive and full of warmth. Party eggnog ring mold. There was a time when a ring mold could turn even the simplest ingredients into a showstopper. In the 1950s and 60s, No festive brunch or holiday spread was complete without a shimmering, perfectly set gelatin creation taking center stage. Among the most memorable of these was the party eggnog ring mold, a dish that married the rich, velvety flavor of eggnog with the mid-century fascination for molded foods. It wasn't just dessert, it was a conversation piece, the kind of recipe that made guests ooh and ah before they even picked up a fork. The process began with a classic homemade or store-bought eggnog, rich with cream, sugar, and warming spices like nutmeg and cinnamon. Gelatin was softened in a bit of cold water, then dissolved into the warm eggnog, transforming the drink into a smooth, sliceable creation. Sometimes, a splash of rum or brandy was added for extra holiday cheer, depending on whether the gathering was more church social or adults-only soiree. Once mixed, the eggnog was poured into a decorative mold. Ring shapes were a favorite, both elegant and easy to serve, and chilled overnight until firm. When unmolded onto a platter, the ring gleamed pale gold, a festive halo ready to be dressed up with garnishes like maraschino cherries, whipped cream, or even sprigs of holly for Christmas morning brunch. Slices were served alongside coffee or tea, the texture somewhere between custard and pudding, with that unmistakable eggnog flavor shining through. Today, this dish has mostly disappeared, a victim of changing tastes and a decline in the popularity of molded foods. But the party eggnog ring mold remains a nostalgic glimpse into a time when creativity and presentation reigned supreme, and when a simple ring of eggnog could steal the spotlight at any holiday table. Coconut pecan coffee ring. There was a time when brunch tables weren't complete without a towering, golden coffee ring taking pride of place in the center. The coconut pecan coffee ring was one of those showstoppers, part breakfast, part dessert, and entirely irresistible. In the pages of mid-century Betty Crocker cookbooks, this recipe promised both elegance and practicality, offering a dish that could be prepared ahead and served warm to a gathering of family or friends. It was the kind of thing a hostess would set out with a pot of freshly brewed coffee, certain that it would draw gasps of admiration before anyone even took a bite. The magic began with a soft, yeasted dough, rich with butter, eggs, and a hint of sugar. Once risen, it was rolled out into a wide rectangle, then generously sprinkled with a filling of shredded coconut, chopped pecans, brown sugar, and melted butter. As it baked, the sugar caramelized, creating little pockets of gooey sweetness and crunch in every slice. The dough was rolled into a long log, shaped into a ring, and often given a few strategic cuts, so the filling peeked through in a beautiful spiral pattern once baked. When the coffee ring emerged from the oven, it was a sight to behold. Golden brown, fragrant with toasted coconut and pecans, and ready for a final flourish of glaze or a dusting of powdered sugar. Served in slices, it was both decadent and comforting, the perfect companion to a steaming cup of coffee on a lazy weekend morning. Today, coffee rings like this are rarities, replaced by store-bought pastries and quick-bake cinnamon rolls. But the coconut pecan coffee ring remains a delicious reminder of a time when a little effort in the kitchen could transform simple ingredients into a centerpiece worthy of celebration. Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches. Some recipes sound unusual until you take that very first bite, and then suddenly they make perfect sense. Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches were one of those quirky mid-century favorites that seemed odd at first glance, but were beloved by many families, especially those who grew up leafing through Betty Crocker cookbooks. This sandwich was the perfect blend of salty, sweet, creamy, and crunchy, a harmony of textures and flavors that captured the spirit of American ingenuity in the kitchen. During the mid-20th century, peanut butter was already a staple in nearly every pantry. It was affordable, protein-packed, and endlessly versatile, appearing in everything from cookies to casseroles. Bacon, on the other hand, was the ultimate breakfast treat, bringing its smoky, savory magic to any dish it touched. Combining the two wasn't just about flavor, It was also about stretching ingredients and creating something satisfying from what was on hand. The sandwich itself was straightforward, yet decadent. Strips of crispy bacon were layered over a thick spread of creamy or crunchy peanut butter on slices of soft white bread. Some adventurous cooks added a drizzle of honey or a few banana slices, taking it into Elvis Presley territory. Though the classic Betty Crocker version kept things simple and savory, the contrast was what made it shine. The warm, salty crunch of bacon against the smooth, nutty richness of peanut butter. This wasn't a dainty tea sandwich. It was hearty, bold, and unapologetically messy, perfect for brunches, late-night snacks, or quick family lunches. Today, while peanut butter and bacon are more likely to appear together in gourmet burgers or trendy bistro menus, the humble sandwich has mostly faded into nostalgic memory. It remains a reminder of an era when flavor experiments happened right at the kitchen table and often became beloved family traditions. Raisin rice casserole. In the mid-century kitchen, casseroles were the ultimate solution to the eternal question of how to feed a hungry family with minimal effort and maximum comfort. The raisin rice casserole was one of those quietly dependable dishes, appearing in Betty Crocker cookbooks as a versatile side or even a lightly sweet main course for brunch. It wasn't flashy or elaborate, but it carried with it the cozy, wholesome spirit of an era when simplicity was celebrated and frugality was a necessity rather than a trend. At its heart, the recipe combined basic pantry staples: cooked white rice, plump raisins, milk, sugar, eggs, and a touch of butter. The mixture came together in minutes, stirred gently until the raisins were evenly scattered like little bursts of sweetness among the creamy grains of rice. Some variations included a hint of cinnamon or nutmeg, adding warmth and a subtle depth of flavor. Once assembled, the casserole was baked until the top was golden and slightly crisp, while the inside remained soft and custard-like. This dish was especially popular for Sunday brunches or holiday mornings. It could be served hot, fresh from the oven, with a drizzle of cream or honey, or cooled and sliced into neat squares for a buffet spread. Its gentle sweetness made it a comforting bridge between breakfast and dessert, satisfying both kids and adults alike. The raisin rice casserole reflected a time when home cooks relied on simple ingredients to create meals that felt nourishing and special. Today, it has largely disappeared from modern tables, replaced by flashier recipes and pre-made convenience foods. Yet, for those who remember it, one warm spoonful brings back memories of bustling kitchens, family chatter, and the belief that good food didn't need to be complicated to be deeply satisfying. Grapefruit broiler surprise. There was a time when grapefruit wasn't just a breakfast side dish, but a centerpiece of the morning table, especially in the pages of mid-century Betty Crocker cookbooks. The grapefruit broiler surprise was one of those recipes that reflected both practicality and a touch of showmanship, transforming an ordinary piece of fruit into something warm, fragrant, and unexpectedly elegant. It was a dish that felt slightly exotic, yet required only a handful of pantry staples and a few minutes under the broiler. Perfect for a busy hostess who wanted to start brunch with flair. The preparation was simple but clever. Grapefruits were halved and carefully loosened from their rinds, the segments cut free so they could be scooped easily with a spoon. The tops were sprinkled with a mixture of brown sugar and a pinch of cinnamon, sometimes with a splash of orange juice or a drizzle of honey for extra flavor. Then came the surprise. A small pat of butter placed right in the center, ready to melt and mingle with the sugar as the heat worked its magic. The grapefruit halves were slid under the broiler just long enough for the sugar to caramelize and form a delicate, crackly topping. When they emerged, the fruit was warm and aromatic, its natural tartness balanced by the buttery sweetness. Some versions even added a maraschino cherry or a sprinkling of toasted coconut for a festive touch, especially during the holidays. Served in their own shells on small saucers, these broiled grapefruits looked every bit as fancy as a restaurant starter, yet they were thrifty and wholesome. Today, grapefruit broiler surprise has mostly disappeared from brunch menus, but it remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when even the simplest ingredients could be transformed into a little bit of morning magic. And there you have it, 30 old-school Betty Crocker brunch dishes that once graced family tables, but have mostly faded into history. Some were comforting, some were quirky, and a few were downright surprising, but each one tells a story of creativity, frugality, and the flavors of another time. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to give this video a like, share it with someone who loves a good nostalgic recipe, and subscribe for more delicious blasts from the past. Your next favorite forgotten